Hi everybody, I hope this finds you doing well. This video is going to be a little different from those I've done in the past in that the focus will not be on Illuminated Cloud. It's going to be on a new project I've been working on called IcApexDoc. And to be clear, this is actually a completely free project available to anybody who wants it, currently in binary distribution. Very soon, probably in, say, the next couple of months, I plan to make it available as an open source distribution so that I can leverage the efforts of the global community to help evolve it and such. And it is a tool for generating HTML documentation for the metadata in your Salesforce project or organization. It consumes ApexDoc comments and signatures, declaration signatures from your Apex types and triggers, and it consumes the description text from your custom objects and fields and produces a very nice, hopefully you'll find it to be that way, a very nice offline documentation, HTML documentation, hyperlinked, cross-reference, things like that. If you've ever used JavaDoc or JSDoc or anything like that in the past, ApexDoc is the Apex analog of those. You'll be very familiar with it. Otherwise, I'll show you as we get into it. This is being offered, made available through my GitHub repo, IcApexDoc, and the landing page, the README page, should provide enough information to get started, both in terms of installation and also in terms of usage, syntax, things like that. I'm not necessarily going to go over everything in detail here because you'll see things in the demo, but I would refer you to this page if you have questions about how to use it, how to write ApexDoc comments, things like that. One thing I will point out very quickly is the license. It's offered under the Apache 2.0 license, a very flexible, very available license, makes it easy to take this without concerns from a legal standpoint, not an issue. But I also want to point out that this license applies only to IcApexDoc. Even though portions of IcApexDoc, in particular the ApexDoc comment parser and the HTML generator, were derived from the analogs in Illuminated Cloud and are now being made available as for free and soon open source, that does not in any way imply that Illuminated Cloud's licensing has changed. It is still a commercial product. It's still subject to its own terms and conditions. So just wanted to get that out of the way. All right, let's jump into the demo. So I'm going to go over to the command line. I said it's a command line tool. And once installed and put into your execution path, it's just a matter of typing ApexDoc. So we can see the usage here. We're going to go over almost every single one of these command line flags as we go through the demo. So let's just go ahead and work with some projects. I'm going to start with, say, declarative lookup rollup summaries. I think a lot of people are familiar with this project and its content. And it gives us a couple of nice talking opportunities with regard to some of the features. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make it so that ApexDoc knows where to find the files for which it should generate documentation. And there are a couple of ways to do that. One way to do that, especially if you're in a source format project, is to just point at the sfdx project.json file, and it will examine it and use the package directories in order to determine what directories should be scanned. It can also pick up things like the project name to use as a title and things like that. And then we need to specify an output directory. So we'll just say ApexDoc. And so let's start with just that, and we may see some opportunities for improvement. So I'm going to hit enter, and you can see it scanned the directories. It's created an output directory. It's parsing everything, and now it's generating the actual HTML files. And so when that completes, let's take a look here. Let's just go ahead and open that in a browser. And here is the generated documentation. And so you can see this is a landing page, index.html. This is what you would go to by default. And it shows you all of the found Apex types, so classes, enums, interfaces, triggers, and custom S objects. Now you say, well, account's not a custom S object. Well, if we click into that, we can see that it is really a holder for custom fields that were found on the account standard S object in this project. But we can use this as an opportunity to talk about these type specific pages. So within these, you're going to see, of course, the declaration signature, including everything that was in the original declaration, hyperlink to the base classes, interfaces, things like that. And I'll even point out that the Salesforce documentation is included in these hyperlinks. Now, because there's no way to navigate back, it's open into a separate tab. But you can see that you can get to the Salesforce web-based documentation for their various types, standard S objects, and things like that, as well as what you're able to see derived from the current project. So let's go back up to our overview page, and we'll look at some other examples of that. Let's go to Apex Classes Selector and take a look at it. So we can see a few things here. We can see below the actual type declaration and its documentation derived from its IcApexDoc comment, we can see a summary view of its members, and that's going to be inner types, constructors, fields and properties, methods, things like that. And then while you won't be able to see this very clearly here, they're hyperlinked once you click on them to the details. We'll look at another example of that. And you can navigate, pretty much as you wish. We can navigate up the inheritance hierarchy, and then we can see that SObject Selector itself is an abstract base class that implements this interface. And you can see within this project all the found derived or implementing types. And then you can see all the members. And if we wanted to go down and take a look at more details on, say, this member, we could click, and this is what I mentioned. It'll go to the anchor for that, and you can see more information. Now, this one doesn't specify any information about the parameters, but you can see that the IcApexDoc for this one did. It specified the meaning of the input relation. We'll look at some more detailed and fleshed out IcApexDoc comments in another project in just a moment, but this gives you an idea of what you can get just immediately from the source that you already have based on the information that's already there. And we can just navigate kind of ad nauseum if we want. We just navigated now to another class. We can navigate to yet another class. We can navigate to Salesforce documentation for strings. So everything's pretty well hyperlinked as available. If we go to the triggers, just to show there, we can filter, by the way, by the various declaration types. So only classes, only enums, only interfaces. One thing I'll point out is it is a flat list. So while there are inner classes, inner interfaces and such shown here, Apex has a limit on the depth. You can only have one level of inner types. So it didn't really make sense to present these as a hierarchy because it would be really the same amount of information shown on the screen as just showing them as a flat list. And this gives you the ability to quickly navigate up and down. Obviously, if that changes in the future, these may become hierarchical. If you want to see trigger information, if the triggers have an IcApexDoc comment that's displayed. If not, you get the declaration signature of the trigger so you can see the S object on which it operates and the DML events and timing on which they operate. And again, you can navigate into that S object and you can see all of the custom fields that define that S object. And the information here about the S object and the fields, that's going to be derived from the actual metadata XML files. So it's going to prefer description text if available. It will degrade to label text and it will degrade to plural labels text in that order. So in this case, as long as you're giving good description text, you're going to get good results here in the generated documentation. Okay, so let's see if there's some opportunities for improvement here. Well, one thing we can see immediately at the top is that it has used the project name, which is quite verbose for this project, as the title stem. So let's see if we can actually fix that and make it a little bit better. So what it's going to do for procuring a title is it's going to look first at the sfdx project.json and see if there's a name property. This doesn't have a name property, but that's a nice declarative way to give your project a title. If it doesn't find that, it's going to use the parent directory name that contains this sfdx project.json file if it's a source format project. Otherwise, say in a metadata format project, it's just going to say IcApexDoc there. Now, we can improve that by adding a -t, and we'll go ahead and say DLRS for a more concise version of that, and we can generate our documentation again, and we should see that it now says DLRS at the top of the actual pages. So as soon as they're generated, we'll see that. All right, so let's skip back over and refresh, and we see that. Now, another thing just went by that I noticed that is worth pointing out, and that is we saw all of these metadata service inner classes, and they're kind of noise in our documentation because they're not internally documented, anything like that, and they take up about half of our vertical scrolling space here. It'd be great if we could omit those, and we can. So let's go back over, and I'm going to add a -x DLRS libs metadata service. For those of you who don't know what that is, basically those are generated files. They come from the Salesforce's metadata API WSDL for invoking it via SOAP. And it allows you, it creates Apex classes that effectively allow you to do SOAP invocations on the metadata API from Apex. So now we just excluded that, so we were able to basically eliminate that from the generated HTML. Now, you could do that with any subset that you want. Basically, you can choose what your input directories are, what your exclude directories are, to your heart's content. And you may, for example, want to exclude all S objects and all triggers and not have those and just have your classes, enums, and interfaces. And you could just add those as exclude directories. So there's quite a bit of control over how to do this. So let's go to another project and look at some other examples. So I'm going to go to Serono Common. It's another open source project. It's an Apex class library for which I'm responsible. And we want to generate documentation for it as well. Now, there are a couple of ways we can do this. We can see that it has an sfdx project.json. So we can and should really use that -p argument. But I'm going to show real quickly what you would do if you were working with a project that was not a source format project, did not have an sfdx project.json. So we could say ApexDoc and specify one or more -s directories. So these are just input directories. So if you could be src if you had that, in this case force app, and now I can say -o ApexDoc and I can generate that. And so now we have this, and we'll go ahead and do our Explorer and open this in my browser, and we can now see the generated documentation. As I mentioned earlier, it degraded to just say ApexDoc because it couldn't derive a project root directory concretely. So that's what it used. Now, if we went back over, this particular sfdx project.json does have a name. We can see it here, Serono Common. So if instead we change that argument to be -p sfdx project.json and regenerated, we should see that it picks up that and uses that as the name. So, so like I said, multiple options for how it picks up the title, multiple options for how it finds its files, for how you exclude files. So now we've generated this. Looks very similar. One thing you may notice very quickly is that it has kind of richer description text, more hyperlink description text. So we can click on this and we're taken directly to that sort method. We can go now directly to the comparator method through the cross-relational see also tags. And the reason for that is that the ApexDoc comments here actually use quite extensively the ApexDoc tag syntax and macro syntax. So for example, comparators, this is where we got those links. So it basically uses the @link macro, both on a type and on a member, and then it's got @c in order to do cross-referencing. We can see that it uses @param and @return to describe inputs and outputs. If we were to go to, say, authorization util, we could see that it actually talks about the, if we scroll down, the thrown exceptions and when they're thrown, under what conditions you should expect those. And so if we come back over here and go to classes and take a look at authorization util, you can see that all that information has come through. So for example, assert updatable, we can see that it throws an authorization exception if the object type specified it can't be updated by the current user. So again, I think this is a situation where the more you put into it, the more that you get out of it in terms of the richness of the information. But even with no ApexDoc whatsoever, it's going to derive what it can from the actual declaration signature information, and obviously from your XML files, which may or may not have more information in their description text, labels, things like that. Okay, let's see if we can improve this documentation a little bit too. Now, one thing I'll also point out is that you only see classes and interfaces. So the navigation is going to be based on what it finds. So in the DLRS, it actually found classes, interfaces, enums, triggers, S objects. Those were present, so you have tabs for those. It's not going to show tabs that basically have nothing to show. So it's going to be more concise with regard to that. So this project actually has some information that will tell you more about the project at a high level before you dive into the fine details of the types and members and things like that. So let's go back over here and take a look, and we can see that there's an overview.html. So let's add that -f overview.html, and now what's going to do is it's going to incorporate that into the overview or landing page. So if we come back over, we can see that there is now a header here that includes that information, and you can even use relative links to the predictable, well-defined type specific pages in order to actually link to those as well. So you should be able to provide very good information about your project, not only at the detailed level through IcApexDoc and through metadata, description text and such, but also at a high level to let people know, how do you navigate this? What does it mean? What are the patterns in place? Things like that. Now let's see if we can improve it a little bit more. Let's say that we we want to brand our generated documentation so that it uses our corporate colors and such. So there's a CSS that gets generated. This is in the output directory. And if you can use this as a starting point, you can see it's well documented in terms of the various custom classes that are used, where they apply, and things like that. And so you can customize it. And in fact, this particular project does exactly that. It makes quite a few changes to colors and such. So let's now generate using that CSS. So we'll go over here and add minus custom CSS, and I'm going to generate. And as soon as it's done, we'll come over and we should be able to see, assuming I can navigate to it, should be able to see now quite a change. You see fonts have changed, font sizes have changed, some of the region spacing has changed. Obviously the colors have changed. They're not very pretty, but this was a good way to make it very clear that, the opportunities for customization. So you should be able to customize this quite a bit. You can specify what subset of your metadata should be included. You can specify how things should look. You can add more detailed high-level documentation for your project. If you're generating documentation for internal use, let's go back over to DLRS for just one moment. This is all generated, by the way, by default, it's going to generate using a minimum visibility threshold of protected. Protected or higher get included, so not private. And that's probably what you want for internal documentation, because that's going to explain what can be used across type boundaries. But let's say you want to generate documentation for your customers for your managed package, so you just want the global interface. So let's go back over to our command line, and let's go back over to declarative lookup rollup summaries. And let's say that we want to generate again. So we'll go ahead and go back to, where's the one that had a title? Yeah, this is the one we want. And let's change our visibility. So we're going to change our output directory, and we're going to say this is customer docs. And we're going to change our visibility to be global. We want to filter for just global. And so it's going to now only include things that are global. You can see quite a few less files were generated. So let's go back to, assuming I can do it. All right, so we'll go to customer docs and open that up. And so this is it. This is the landing page. If you remember before, it scrolled pretty far down. And now this is it. So you can see your S objects. You can see some classes, some interfaces, some enums. And if we filter by those individual declaration types, I can see it's pretty much the primary service interfaces and the inputs and outputs required for those interfaces. So optimizer service. And you can even see inside of here that it's pared down the public members and protected members that might have been available in here for internal use. So if we go to optimizer service here, you can see that there are public things that are not included here. So it really is just the global interface. The enums, the triggers, technically not global, but they are visible in the subscriber organizations. They do contribute to the behavior of everything. Again, if you wanted to omit this, you would just do a -X on the directory. And the S objects and S object fields are, of course, inherently global. So that gives you an opportunity to generate outward-facing documentation that is the constrained interface that is accessible by subscribers, partners, whoever it happens to be. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to show. That's, at a high level, the tool. If you want to know more, again, I encourage you to go here and you can see the features, you can see the syntax. If you're curious about how to install it, again, it's just downloading a zip, extracting that zip somewhere, and adding the bin directory to your operating system's path environment variable. The command line usage, we just went through pretty much every command line option there. And then, again, the specifics of each of those and how you can actually put together your inputs, outputs, filters, things like that. So I look forward to getting feedback on this. If you find bugs, if you have thoughts on enhancements and things like that, there's a public issue tracker right here. Please log them, put them in there. I'm going to be putting some of my own in there. Some of the things I'm looking forward to doing are effectively linting type things to tell you if your Apex doc is incomplete, if you've got tags that should have description text or have unresolvable parameter names or whatever. I'm planning to add that. So not only can you generate your documentation, but you can also assess the quality of the generated documentation and know where you should spend your time improving it. I'm planning to add additional navigation capabilities here so that there's a full index, so that if you know the name of a constant or you know the name of a method, but you're not sure exactly what type it resides in, you could go to the index and you could go to the starting letter, the tab for the starting letter of that. You could find it, and then it would take you to the type or types that contain those particular members. One of the ApexDoc tags you can use is @group. It allows you to effectively ascribe a tag to a declaration, and I'm planning to add a groups tab here that would show all found groups. So when you click on it, it would basically show you all declarations tagged with that group. So basically a taxonomical breakdown of your declarations based upon what you've done declaratively through your ApexDoc @group tags, things like that. Those are things I'm planning to add, and of course to move it into open source. Love to hear what other thoughts you have, and of course if there are bugs, I want to fix them. Otherwise, thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing how it goes for you. Thanks for your time.